Hey everyone, welcome back to the Space Podcast. I'm your host, Max Young. On this show, we dive deep into thoughtful conversations with creative minds from across the industry, sharing insights, stories, and the spark behind their work. Today, I'm joined by Malte Veh, a freelance videographer who turned his passion into a career. What began when he first picked up a camcorder at the age of 12 has since evolved into his full-time work, shooting with athletes and sports brands across Europe. In this episode, we chat about how Malte was able to go full-time freelance right after finishing university, the challenges and unique experiences of working in the sports industry, and what it takes to balance multiple projects while maintaining creative satisfaction and growing a freelance business.
If there's not a specific percentage of jobs that you get rejected because you're too expensive, then you're too cheap, because at some point you won't be able to do any more jobs, and then you start working, but still earning less than someone who's doing half of the jobs because he said no at the right time.
Enjoy the chat. Hey man, thank you so much for joining the podcast. We've worked on a shoot together earlier this year, and I've been following you for since then basically. So I'm really interested. Could you tell me a bit about and guide me through kind of your photography and videography journey? Like how and where did you start, and what did it take to lead you to where you are at now?
Yeah, absolutely. It's all started when I was still in school, and I kind of found my hobby in this, and I kept doing it for school projects at first, and I also loved to film the kind of family holidays that we were going on. I was kind of known as the video guy at one point, and that's when kind of the first I would say jobs came in, but there was still kind of friends of the family or something, and really small jobs. But eventually I did get paid, which was absolutely mind-blowing at the time, and I couldn't really believe it, which made me even more eager to pursue this more and to get better. And I watched a lot of YouTube and tried to get better with every video. I think when I look back now, it was definitely needed that I did have to get better, because at the time it wasn't really good, but it kind of went quite nicely, and I went from one job to the next. And at the time, one video took weeks or even months to edit, so I couldn't really do a lot, and I wasn't even asked to do a lot. But I kind of got into a rhythm, and then slowly it started to get more work, especially when I joined university. I had a lot more time on the side. As this was during COVID, this kind of became my thing, and I didn't really have to do anything else, or I didn't have anything else to do. I started taking it even more seriously, and I wanted to build this to be able to go fully freelance after finishing my studies, and that luckily worked out. And now I've been 100% freelance, I think for now 2 or 3 years ago. Yeah, this is kind of how it went. Of course, I met some right people along the way. There was just never really an option for me to do anything else. I also did an internship during my studies in Berlin, which helped me a lot with getting connections to the right people. And then someone from my school actually opened a sports marketing firm where I also work with brands like Adidas quite quickly, because he had big trust in me. And then kind of from there, it all developed into something bigger, and also where I am now.
Yeah, that's quite the journey. Would you say that it went kind of seamless for you, or was there any obstacles along your way? Right after your studies, you were straight away able to commit to freelancing full time? Did studying help you in any way?
When I think, or even when I talk about it now, it all seems kind of very streamlined for me. It's this one path, and this led me here. But of course, when I was in that situation, I didn't have a plan. I didn't know the film industry, the creative business side of things. So I really didn't have this strategy to make this into a career. I just knew that this was fun and I wanted to do it. So I kind of just kept doing it and was hoping for the best, basically. That was, I think, my strategy, and I also took it very slowly. When I compare it now to other fellow creatives of mine who kind of picked up their first camera when they were 25 or even older, I think it's a whole different pressure when you start at that age. And I started so young, and also did the studies where I had a lot of time on the side, and I had kind of the security at the time that I could try different things. I didn't have the pressure that this has to be my living right from the get-go, because everything that I did at this time was kind of a bonus on top, and I was happy with every invoice that I could write, but I didn't rely on it. And I think that was what made the difference for me, and kind of slowly I could make the connections, and I kind of could figure out where my place was in the industry and what I wanted to do, because even there was a lot of back and forth. I thought about going to a proper film university for a long time, because I thought that was the path that you had to go to become a film person. But but that seems like very far off where I'm at now, because I mostly do like ads or commercials, and I don't really do anything where it's like a scenic film or anything. My views have changed a lot over the time, and I wanted to be a director, then I wanted to be a DOP, then just a videographer for events, and now I'm happy to do still a mixture of different stuff, but now also much more confident in the place where I am now. At that time, I was also very, very lost, and was glad that I could have the safe space of studying at university, but I didn't really learn anything for the stuff that I'm doing now, aside from the personal connections that I got through university, which were very, very nice because they're now my best friends, and also I could actually talk to them about all of this creative stuff about equipment for the first time ever, because none of my friends from school were interested in this at all.
So you're basically saying that you were kind of lost, but figured everything out along the way by just like trying out different directions, like different things, right? Looking back, what would you say were like the biggest things that you did right that accelerate you to your career where you are now?
I think the biggest game changes for me was every time I kind of stepped outside of my bubble or outside of my network, I would say, because the internship I already mentioned was in Berlin with a company I had never heard of before I applied there. And it was kind of a small team. We were, I think, 8 or 9 people there at this production company at the time. I moved to Berlin from Stuttgart for this internship. This really opened a lot of doors for me, I think, because I got to see and feel what it's like to actually produce also bigger commercials and work alongside a team, because until then I've done basically no projects with anyone else. I've done all of them completely by myself, and that kind of changed the way I started to think about production. I still have, for example, one producer that was working there at the time who's still hiring me for different jobs now, and this is already 3.5 years ago now. It just shows that the connections you have, you can profit off of them for a long time if you do it right, and if you're a nice person and you actually do good work.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think that like networking, or like in general connecting to people in like a genuine way, is like the best way to actually make an impact in your like freelancing kind of career, or in general in your like work career, because you never know when somebody can like hit you up and like ask you for something, or when maybe you need something from them and you can like reach out and talk to them. So that actually leads me to my next question, which is, how do you make money? There are different ways, there are different like rates, budgets, and so on.
I still think that figuring out what your work is worth is one of the most difficult things about this, because either no one tells you or everyone tells you something different, and you kind of have to figure out where you kind of stand and also where you kind of want to be, because of course if you charge very low you might get asked to do more projects, but if they're all paid really shittily, I don't know if it makes sense, and if you start going too high then maybe no one will hire you. It's all about figuring out kind of the sweet spot where you want to be. It's also a huge learning curve and a big process to figure that out. I think what changed it a lot for me was just talking to different people and asking them what they're charging, and then kind of finding the middle ground that feels good for me. Of course that got higher over time, as you should, because at the start I was like charging 200 euros per day or something like that, and that's not really sustainable to build a career out of. Of course that had to improve over time. What you were asking also is if I mostly do it per rates or if the client tells me a budget, and that's very different regarding what kind of project it is. Like usually if it's like event coverage or I do like a video recap for one day, I just tell them my rate, and then either it's fine or it's not, which also unfortunately happens sometimes. If it's a bigger project, usually it makes more sense if the client tells me a budget, and I always try to communicate it to them in the same way that I'm doing now, because then I can plan kind of around it, and they have a higher budget. We can think about maybe getting some more rental equipment, like bigger lights, a nicer camera, and also thinking about what team size we have, and if it maybe makes sense to bring in someone that does the lighting, does the audio. With that, of course, increasing the quality that the client then can expect in the end. It always makes more sense to kind of plan from that side if it is a bigger production, like a campaign or like a proper commercial or something. But I would say most of the time I just write an offer or just tell my rate, and then we go from there.
Okay, interesting. So it really depends on like the project that you work on, but you already have like some ideas in mind how to like navigate this conversation if it comes up. How would you then like tell a client like, hey, your budget isn't matching to what I would like to charge? Do you then just like tell them straight away like, hey, I can't do the project? Or do you try to like find a middle ground and figure out a way that works for both of you?
In general, I think it's one of the most important skills for any freelancer to always be ready to find a solution that fits the client, because maybe for some reason they don't have the budget that you would want for it to be exactly the project that you have in your mind. But then it's about stepping back your ego and kind of thinking what you can do in order to help them. And maybe you can't bring a second person onto the shoot, and maybe you can only offer them one editing day, for example, for that. And then I think instead of just saying, no, we can't do it, just showing them, okay, if you can't pay this, then we will have to cancel this and this and this, but we can still do this and this. And just showing a way of offering solutions instead of just naming the problems. Of course, if there is a limit that you can't go under, then it doesn't make sense to do the project. But a lot of the times when you actually tell the client what they can get for this money and this money, they actually see the benefit of paying maybe a little bit more instead of just going back and forth. Oh no, we want to pay this, then I can offer this. Like, I think it always makes sense to show the client what they're actually getting for it and kind of going from there.
Yeah, I think that totally makes sense. So you're saying that in most cases, you would then either try to adjust the deliverables to match the client's budget, or
either adjusting the deliverables or the team size or just the project scope in general.
I love that I have you on right now, because you were like one of the people that I called when I was like thinking about switching from being employed and like doing freelancing on the side. I mean, I'm doing freelancing for like 5 years now, I think, mostly prior to that as like a side thing when I started university. But luckily for like the last 4 months and hopefully going forward, I can continue like doing freelancing full time. Some of the things that you told me in our call that we had like a month ago were like really valuable to me. So I try to like revisit that, and hopefully you can like share some nuggets that you told me in this podcast as well. So one of the other things I'm wondering is, besides then having the kind of like the sales conversation with the client, the step prior to that would be getting clients at all, right? Like getting projects, like either directly talking with a client or being brought on by like other people. What is your history with that? Do you have any like thoughts and opinions on like cold calling or warm outreach, getting clients come to you? I know that you sometimes also work with agencies. What's your like thought about that?
Yeah, so I've barely ever done client outreach. So most of the time, or like 95% of the time, usually when I work, it's clients that I have either worked with in the past or they got like a direct recommendation of me, which is of course, I guess, the most comfortable position to be in, because then I can also trust on this being kind of fitting towards my style, because if there's new clients coming to me, then they probably looked at my work and probably see that it fits to what they want to be doing anyway. And that could be either like in the artistic style or in the industry that we're doing. So for example, I get approached a lot, of course, for sports projects or lifestyle projects, events as well, because I've done a lot of that in the past, and that's also what interests me the most. So it's always really nice if someone comes to you, because then they're probably coming to you for the stuff that you like to do anyway. That's also maybe a tip for someone just starting out, is always to show in your portfolio and online the stuff that you want to be doing, because that's what you're probably going to be getting booked for anyway. Just developed over time. I guess that's the most boring answer that I can give to that question. I think it always makes sense, going back to the start, to expand your network and to reach out to people. That's also, I think, one of the biggest learnings for me this year, is to reach out, because you never know what you may get out of a connection. One of my biggest clients now is Hyrox. They're like a global fitness competition that started through me reaching out to a very old friend of mine who I haven't been talking to for years, and I kind of just wrote like more or less random DM because I saw that he was doing an internship there, and from that developed one of the best partnerships now, and I work with them now quite frequently. Just one message can go a long way, and even if it doesn't work out, then maybe the next time or sometimes in the future, and you just gotta keep trying, putting yourself out there, telling just everyone that you do what you do.
You told me that you do barely outreach yourself most of the time. It either comes from connection or like from past projects, right? So I'm guessing that something that you do works, right? Either like how you talk and how you interact with clients, but also like how you showcase your work. So do you have any like kind of rules that you live by and work by that really helps you to showcase yourself and your skills in the best light possible?
I think there's not just one way where you have to do that and then the clients will come running for you. I think it's just a mixture of different things. For one, I think you should definitely have a website. I know some creators who still don't have a website, and I think that's just still the most important thing. If you actually want to get bigger projects, then you have to be able to send your website, and then on the one side you have to show that you've done the work that you've done, and also like just include a picture of you, a short description, just so people actually actually know the face behind all of that work. And then Instagram is more important for showing it to other people in the creative space. So other videographers, for example, even agencies a little bit, because they are all on there as well. But for clients, I wouldn't really say it's that important even, because I've never gotten any client that wrote to me and said, oh, I discovered your Instagram. I love what you're doing. Will you work for us? And I think that rarely happens. But of course, if you work together with other creatives, which is also a way to like kind of get started really easily, because other creatives are much more open to work with other creatives than maybe clients are working with new people. So it's also a really nice way to get into that. The last point that I would add would maybe be LinkedIn as another platform where a lot of clients are. I think I've done maybe 10 or 12 posts maximum, and I've still gotten requests for 2 bigger projects from there. I would have never expected that, and that's also maybe one more thing to consider. Either way you do it, I think it's just really important to be on different platforms and show yourself. Actually, people can see what you're doing, and trying to keep your portfolio updated, which I'm also not very good at, I have to say.
All of these like 3 platforms that you mentioned, so your website / portfolio, your Instagram account, and your like LinkedIn profile, are all like separate ways to reach and connect with like different people or agencies or companies, right? I would assume that you would have to like tailor your work specifically to these platforms. So like something you would post on your website probably doesn't perform on Instagram, right? And vice versa. Oftentimes on like the website, like some people like to like showcase kind of like a case study, and on the Instagram, some sort of like either behind the scenes or like show the end results of the product or like the project that you do. How do you think about like these platforms on what you post or what you write?
Instagram is the best way to show, as you said, behind the scenes content and the actual output of the projects that you do quite regularly, because of course, as it's post based, you can just do a behind the scenes story when you're on the shoot, and then you can post a finished product a couple of weeks later. I think for the website, just really important that you show your best work there. It doesn't have to be so much. A nice show reel can already reveal what you're doing, and then a couple of projects on top of that, and maybe some words are fine. And of course, LinkedIn is a lot more words based, text based. So there it's more about kind of telling the story behind the image. And of course, it's nice also to post there your finished videos. But I think it's more about actually telling like a bit of a larger story than just the project itself.
After finishing a project, sometimes projects are under NDA or you don't even have the rights of the project itself. How do you like go along with that to be able to like post about it?
Of course, and I also experienced it this year. There are projects where you would really like to show what you've done and the client that you work for, especially if it's like a really big name. But the bigger the name is, the more dangerous it is that you will never be able to show it. I think you just kind of have to accept that. You can't show every project. It always makes sense to communicate it and try to see where you can maybe like post something about it in the future. But it's the most important thing that you kind of respect that. And many clients are also very serious about this, that you are professional and kind of put the project needs above everything else, and kind of don't think the first thing about how I can post this or how I can make it look as nice as possible on Instagram. That's also a fine line you have to be on when you actually post on Instagram, because I think sometimes it can actually damage you if you look too much like an influencer, because some clients then might not take you too serious. You always have to be kind of mindful of what you're sharing, and in doubt, always just don't share it and just don't worry about it.
I've heard from like some people that they even like include that as like a side note in their offer or in their quote, that they like tell the client like, hey, if you work together with me, like I'm planning on like doing some sort of like case study afterwards. Have you ever thought about that, or do you like always communicate it just afterwards?
Mostly afterwards. I always go by trying to make it as easy for the client as possible, and of course sometimes that doesn't work out. And I've also learned my lessons with projects being cancelled last minute and there was no agreement on that beforehand. And I think you should definitely have that in place. Certain rules that are like very basic, but I think also you should always remember that you are kind of doing a service for them. And I think that also includes that you try to do everything that makes it as easy for them as possible. And a client often has so many things in the back of their mind that you don't even know as a creator. And that also applies to, for example, feedback to a video, where you kind of sit there and think, oh, that feedback doesn't make any sense, but maybe you don't know the full story. So instead of starting to discuss with them, maybe you should accept it and accept their side of things as well, even if you don't agree with it, because in the end, that's what you're getting booked for. You're getting booked to do a service service. And also, of course, be an expert, and you have to know the right moments to present yourself as an expert and maybe give advice that this makes more sense or this looks nicer. I would always not focus too much on me being able to post after the project, even though it is important to get future work. But I also think it's maybe even more important to make that client happy and not annoy him with like little things like that.
I know that you do like biking content, you do like work with gyms, for example. You also do like soccer. Why did you specifically chose to do like fitness content? And just like how does it like normally look like when you're on a shoot like that?
So I would say even more than just fitness content, it's more sports content in general. That just came from it being, I think, my second biggest passion. I love doing sports, but also especially I love watching sports. And I've been going to my local football club since I was also a kid, and I've always had a very big interest in that. This is just the perfect way for me to combine those two passions. And I love filming and photography. I love sports. So if I can do both at the same time, and this might sound cheesy, but it's like literally my dream job. I have to say, just working alongside legends like Lionel Messi, for example, or other like really big sports person that I've always seen on TV, and now suddenly I can actually work with them. Still, I'm happy that I don't only do that, because working in sports also comes with a lot of restrictions. For example, I had a shoot with, let's say, big American sports brand 2 or 3 weeks ago. We were there like planning beforehand for a couple of days. It was 2 of us, so me and my second shooter, and we also rented equipment from I think 3 different places. We had to travel there to Munich for the shooting. It was like in a big studio. There was a client that one of them came from France and one came even from the US, so they traveled really far for it. And then on the evening before the shoot, there was we got the timing, because there was also other shoots happening at the same day. In the end, we had a slot of 5 minutes of shooting. Yeah, that's also one of the big downsides in sport, that you always have very restricted time, because we were shooting there with a football player and they don't have a lot of time, and every minute costs like I don't know how much. That also is nice working there, because it's like a really specific challenge and you have to be on top of your game to get the best out of those 5 minutes, especially since we had to do photo and video content with them. It was crazy, definitely. But on the other side, of course, it's nice if you actually can establish a connection with the person that's in front of your camera. Like when you have a model, if you're doing like a fashion shooting, for example, there's just a whole different way to work there. I still would take that 5-minute job any day, but it's also crazy. And you can't do that every day, because it's also like very high pressure. During those 5 minutes, everything has to go 100% right, because I don't know, if the focus is off or you have to readjust the lighting or something, you just don't have the time for this.
I imagine it is like really kind of stressful, but also I'm guessing very, very like fulfilling. And you can combine like both passions into like one thing. How does your typical day look like? Because you're doing a lot of like shooting, you also do the photography, you also sometimes do editing. Because you're a freelancer, you also have to do like admin work, the more boring stuff, I would say. Do you have any kind of workflow or structure that you can expect in your week, or does it always change?
Yeah, I wish I would have like a typical week, but as you said, it always changes quite a lot. And oftentimes it feels like I have 2 very different jobs at the same time, or maybe even 3, because when I'm shooting, it's like almost completely opposite of when I'm not shooting. When I'm shooting, I'm always traveling, I'm around a lot of people, and of course, like working with the camera, there's a completely different skill set that you need compared to when you're sitting alone at home and maybe editing. So I think there's a very, very big difference between shooting and editing. I would say I'm probably traveling and shooting maybe 30% of the time when I'm working, but the other side is just being in calls, finishing up projects, doing revision rounds with clients. Yeah, that just takes a lot of time as well, and a lot of preparations, especially for the bigger projects, where you also have to establish what you actually want to be filming, because also that differs quite a bit. Clients coming to me with a specific idea that they want me to shoot, or also with like just really nothing, and they say, oh, we want to do something for a summer campaign next year, what are we gonna do? And then of course there's much more work involved in the whole pre-production process. It depends quite a lot. I always like it more when I'm out and about and shooting. This is also why I feel very lucky that especially this year I've had a lot of projects that were edited by someone else, and I always feel like then the outcome also improves, or a lot of the times improves, because if someone else edits it for you, then once you see it for the first time, you have like a complete different set of eyes for looking at that. So you can actually give also much better feedback, I think. And if you're shooting and editing at the same time, also like in quite a short time window, you kind of can't even say if the video is good or not. Like I had one big project that we were working on this year, and at some point I couldn't tell if it's a good video or not because you've just seen it 100 times. And I always love it when you can work with different people and kind of play creative ideas back and forth. What I don't really like is just shooting and then just sending the footage off, and then I might not even see the finished product at the end, because that's also why I started at the beginning. I love it to be part of the full creative process and not just be one tiny piece in like a bigger picture.
Yeah, that totally makes sense. You said that every week does look different for you. Do you have any kind of recurring structure in like the grand scheme of things? Like let's say in a month or like in a couple of months in advance, do you already know how many projects you kind of can take on or you will take on? Do you have only like one-off projects? Earlier we were talking about your client relationship and clients come to you. So do you always know in your back end of your mind people like will reach out to you? Because I think one of the biggest fears as a freelancer, and one that I had at the beginning, was like, okay, cool, if I have like a project going on right now, but I have no idea if I can make it work next month. So how do you handle that? Do you have any like retainers or no?
I don't have any retainers, and I still know that feeling very well. Even this year, which was by far the best year that I've had so far as a freelancer, I think now that feeling kind of got even stronger, I feel like sometimes, because now suddenly I have something to lose, which I didn't have before, where it was always like going, oh, now it's going a bit better than last year, and now it's going a bit better than last month. So you kind of always had that step up over time. Once you reach like a specific level, that gets harder because a lot of the times you can't do any more projects than you've actually done. And then it's kind of like, okay, well, maybe next year there won't be as many projects as this year. And then you kind of start, okay, how can I maintain this level of work? I enjoyed this so much, I don't want to lose it, because of course over time you also start to get used to this lifestyle and this kind of work. I think there's always some uncertainty connected to being a freelancer. And I think, at least for me, I can say this probably will never go fully away, but it also what kind of keeps me on my toes, because I know that I have to keep doing this. When I look back, I also can say, okay, the way I've done it, it was enough and it was okay. And the chances of it going on like this are higher than suddenly everything falling apart and nobody wants to work with me again. From the more work you do, you kind of earn a confidence that it will go on like this. But at the same time, there's also different thoughts that now come into your head. But for me, I would say more than it dragging me down, I think it pushes me to keep going at it, because I always have this worst case impression in my head of me waking up at a Monday morning and then being in some kind of corporate call and just being stuck on my desk all day. I'm so grateful for what I have now that I couldn't envision a different way of living and working. So there's no other way. Always still keeping, of course, the passion and the fun behind it, and always trying to remember why you started in the first place. I think for many freelancers, probably you kind of get lost in that, or you kind of lose it out of your vision. But I think going back to that is always a good idea.
So basically you're forcing yourself, try to make it work, or like basically there's like no other option. Do you go then like month by month, or do you have at least like a couple of months planned in advance for the next 2 months, for the next 3 months? I have like some projects.
Not really, to be honest. I mean, it always depends on the project. Sometimes I know it like 2 or 3 months in advance, which is always really nice, like to kind of plan that in. For the client, it's also good because then he knows that he can plan with me. For example, this November and December, there was no projects in the calendar up until like the last week of October, I think. So it was like, okay, then the year is going to slowly fade out and I guess it won't be so busy. But now November and December turned out to be the best months I've ever had as a freelancer. So I never really know what it's going to turn out. It's not ideal, I would say. I would appreciate it more if I could plan more ahead. But the kind of work that I do is so short notice a lot of the times, especially like with professional athletes. They themselves don't know where they will be next week. So it's kind of very hard to do a project plan around that. There's just so much happening. I think also many brands and agencies have gotten used to asking at the last minute and it's still working. So that's kind of why they don't have to change that strategy.
So what I'm really out of that is that like one of the biggest skills that you have to develop as a freelancer is to be very spontaneous.
Yeah, I think there's also people I know that do it quite differently and they have retainers, like they have for like 6 months, they do very specific work for a specific client, like they do 10 videos a month. I think I could be there more, and I had also a big offer in that regard with a German car company, and I decided that I don't want to do it because if you commit to that, of course you have the safety of this client, but also you're much less flexible to maybe change change to another client, and you kind of really fix on that. And especially in the phase where I am now, where it's still growing a lot and there's new opportunities coming up, you never really know where it's going to lead you, and I don't want to be in a position where I can't react to that. And that is why I'm also freelance, because I want to keep that freedom. And you also have to, of course, see with every project. Sometimes it does make sense, of course, to have this, and especially like editing retainers, I think can make sense for many freelancers at the start, that they kind of do 3 days editing for a video production company, for example, and they kind of have like a base level of income, so you don't have to stress out all of the time. But I want to maintain that level of flexibility, and that's why I choose not to do it so much.
I think everybody has like determined for themselves like what makes up their kind of like freelance success story, like their happiness in like freelancing. You were mentioning that you really enjoy being not that much behind your desk, but like more shooting somewhere, right? Like traveling, like working with other people. What are other things that you figured out maybe this year in particular that you say like, hey, that are like some biggest learnings I had this year that made me enjoy freelancing even more than the years before?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think one of the most important things, and that also goes back to the answer I just gave to the question before, is to be able to say no to specific things. Because at the start, especially as a videographer, I think it's one of the biggest assets if you say yes to everything. But then at a certain point that kind of changes, because if you keep saying yes to everything all of the time, then it doesn't really make sense for you, because then you probably don't charge enough. You just do project after project, and then you probably will burn out after some time. So I think it's really important to also set your priorities and know what you want to be doing. If something doesn't lead you into the direction of where you're going, then to also say no to specific things. And also maybe to go back to the pricing, which we discussed earlier, I think there is also, and I think a friend told me this once, if there's not a specific percentage of jobs that actually you get rejected because you're too expensive, then you're too cheap. Because if every client says, yeah, of course, we're gonna do it right away, of course, it's nice because you get all of the jobs, but at some point you won't be able to do any more jobs, and then you're stuck with a lot of clients that are not paying you enough, and you're just working and working and working, but still earning less than someone who's maybe doing half of the jobs because he said no at the right time, and you kind of just went with the flow. I think it's very important that you also know your worth. If it doesn't fit something for you, either because it's not paid enough or because it's in a industry you don't really want to work in or anything like that, it's also okay. You will be able to keep freelancing even if you don't do this one thing. That also transfers over to, I think, private life, because I think it's very dangerous if you always prioritize work. Like, for example, when you have a trip planned, then just cancel it because there's been a last minute job that came in. I think you should still go do that trip. Of course, you have to decide. Sometimes, especially if you're in the beginning, maybe it's more wise to go and do the job. But I think at a specific point, you have to really set your priorities and know what you want. Other than that, you will probably get lost and also lose the interest in doing videography or any creative business.
Yeah, I think those like points that you said are really like kind of like self-reflective of deciding what you prioritize and kind of setting the path to grow. Otherwise, you're stuck at where you are. Speaking of that, you told me that you thought this year would kind of like fade out very gradually and very like smooth, right? But then like this month and the last month, so December and November, were like the best performing years for you so far. Are there any specific things that you are working on yourself right now, or anything that you will look for in the beginning of next year that you're eager to start?
Yeah, so right now I'm talks with a client of mine to do my first project outside of Europe. This would be in New Zealand even. Yeah, I think this is one of the biggest dreams or goals of mine, to actually do a project abroad that's further away than, let's say, Portugal, for example. And of course, New Zealand would be a place where you wouldn't usually go if you get even paid to do that. That would be the dream. Well, let's see.
I think New Zealand is like stunning. I have a friend of mine who did like work and travel there for a bit, and the images I saw were like really, really beautiful. So I hope the best for you to like make the gig work and have an amazing time there. Thank you so much, man, for joining a podcast. Where can people find and get in contact with you if they want to like see your work or even like work with you directly?
Yeah, I think the best platform for me is still Instagram. Yeah, you can kind of follow along my journey a little bit. I always try to post stories quite regularly, and of course you can always write me a DM there. I'm always very happy to get to know new people and always give advice if someone needs it, if I can even give it. You can see my work there. It's under just my name, Malte Veh. Looking forward to everybody reaching out. Yeah, thanks so much. It's been a pleasure.